Hey there, TouchDesigner developers. Jack DiLaura here with the Interactive and Immersive HQ. In this video, we're going to work on recreating an artwork of Victor Vasarely's in TouchDesigner. So Vasarely was an artist who came to prominence in the mid-20th century and who is known for creating works in the op art style. So a lot of his works are very colorful and play with a sort of pseudo-dimensional effect using warping or different shapes to add this like dimensionality to the work. And so in this video, we're going to work on creating this one that you see here on the left, which is featured at the Vasarely Museum in Budapest. And we're going to approach that or look at how we can approach recreating that within TouchDesigner. So having just seen the final outcome of our project today, you might be assuming that we're going to be working with top textures, but actually that was all constructed with 3D geometry and an orthographic camera, which allows us to build this with definitely fewer operators, but also adds a little bit of flexibility to make it easier to change things like the color and the positioning for you to be able to then go and create a composition of your own. So we're going to begin by adding a box stop, and this will be used for the kind of diamond-shaped components of the painting that were on the bottom left and the upper right. So within the box stop, we're going to make a couple of changes. We're going to first modify the size parameter, and we're going to set the size here to something much larger than the 1x1x1 standard. We're going to do a 240 by 240 square, and then we're going to make the Z dimension be 1680. From there, we'll come to the rotate Z parameter, and we'll set that to 45 so that we get that diamond shape that we saw at the beginning. Then we will add a texture SOP after that, and within that we're going to change just one parameter here. We're going to set our projection axis to x-axis instead of z-axis. That's not going to do a whole lot right now, but basically it's going to orient our texture that we're going to be adding in the correct axis later on. From there we can attach a geocomp and place that to the right, and then we can work on creating the material for this geometry. So instead of adjusting our geocomp, what I'm going to do is actually add a material and set up a render pipeline so that we can actually see what those adjustments look like. We'll start by adding a constant mat, and then click and drag that onto the Geo1 operator and hit parameter material to make sure that that is being applied. Then I'm going to actually add the render top first, because we're going to reference this within our camera to set our orthographic view's width. So I'm going to add the render top. It is going to give us a warning that we don't have a camera comp, but that's okay. Before we move on though, let's go ahead and set our render settings. Really the only thing we have to change here is set our output resolution, which in this case is going to be 1024 by 1024. Then let's go ahead and add a camera comp. And once we've done that, we have to make a couple of changes there as well. So within the camera comp, first of all, let's make sure that we're looking at our scene from an orthographic projection instead of perspective. We're going to use the orthographic projection to give us the same flat look that the original Vasarely painting has. So within the projection parameter, let's go ahead and set that to orthographic. Then we need to set our ortho width, and this is where our render comes into play. So we want to basically connect the ortho width parameter to the width of our rendered output. So within the ortho width dropdown, I'm going to type in an expression to grab that information from render 1. So let's type in op, open and close parentheses, single quotes, and then we want render 1, and then we want to grab the dot par resolution W, which should give us a value of 1024. Once we do that, we should then see our diamond shape on screen. Now that we've done that, we can actually head back to the Geo and make the adjustments there and actually see what they accomplish in our final rendered output. So what we're going to be doing here is basically translating our shape as well as rotating it slightly so that we can get the kind of positioning that we want. So within the translate parameters, let's set our translate X parameter here to -340. We'll then set the translate Y parameter to -170. Then in the rotate section, let's set the rotate Y to 12. And then we want to rotate in the Z direction by -90. That should provide us with something that looks a little bit similar to what we saw at the beginning, but we do have to make one additional change in the camera in order to see the full kind of shape that we have added. So one thing that we forgot to do here was to come into the near and far settings, and for the far setting here, we're going to set that to 15,000. That basically changes the draw distance from the camera's perspective. And then we're going to come to the transform page and set our translate Z parameter to 10,000. What we should then see is that the shape should extend to the bottom corner of our render. And once we add a texture, we should see something that looks very similar to the original. So our camera is all set up, our render is all set up. Let's add a material now so that we can actually, get something that looks similar to the painting. So the way that I approached this was by using a ramp top. So I'm going to add the ramp top first. We're going to put it up and to the left of the constant top, or the constant material rather, so that we can use the ramp keys table and enter in specific colors. I'm also going to attach a null here first, and then I'm going to drag the null onto the constant, which will apply it as the color map. So we can see already that we've got a nice gradient on that shape, and that looks pretty cool. But if we want to get the actual sort of look of the Vasarely painting, we're going to use the ramp keys table in order to set up our ramp to look that way. Before we add those keys though, one thing I want to do within the ramp itself is to set our interpolate notches parameter. So the interpolate notches parameter is currently set to linear, and we need to set that to step. Once we do that, that is going to change our output to black. That's okay. We're going to add keys to this table now, which will then add colors back into our output. So we're basically going to set up this table once and then copy and paste this ramp top for our additional textures so we don't have to keep entering and adding in different rows to our table. So what I'm going to do here is turn on the viewer, and then we need a total of 7 rows after our initial kind of row of labels. So I'm going to click on the first row here and then hit add below a bunch of times until our final row here reaches the number 7. Then I'm going to go in and enter all of the position values for the different colors that we're going to be adding. Our first color is going to be set at position 0, and then I'll move down, and our second one is going to be at a value of 1/6 or 0.166. Then we'll have one at 1/3, which is 0.333. And we'll have one at 1/2, which is 0.5, then 0.666, then 0.833, and then our final value is going to show up at the position of 0.997, almost at the end, but not quite. From there, we can then enter in the colors for each one of these positions. So for our first row, we're going to have a color of a kind of dark purple. I'm going to enter 0.26 for the red, 0.19 for the green, 0.28 for blue. While we're here, I'm also going to add an alpha of 1 for all of the different positions because we're not going to have any transparency. So I'm just going to do that preemptively so we don't have to do it in each row that we change. So we've got all those ones filled in. Now we can continue with our colors. Then we're going to do a slightly lighter purple, 0.33 in the red, 0.23 in the green, 0.36 in the blue. Then we'll move down a row and 0.38 in the red, 0.27 in the green, and 0.42 in the blue. Again, next row, 0.46 in the red column, 0.33 in the green column, 0.46 in the blue column. In our fifth row here, we're going to have a value of 0.51 in the red column, 0.37 in the green column, 0.51 in the blue column. And then in our sixth row, 0.58, 0.44, and 0.55. And then in our final row, we're going to have a value of 0.37 in the red, 0.26 in the green, and 0.40 in the blue. So go ahead now and double check that you have entered all of those values correctly. Once you have done so, you should see this kind of stepped gradation that we see here. And if we then go and look at our final output in the render, we should see that our kind of final little slice here, this one at 0.997, that is what is providing our the kind of top of this rectangle, or this box geometry with that color purple. So this looks great, and we are pretty much ready to now move on to adding our second diamond shaped geometry. So what I'm going to do here is just move the render down and to the right, because we're going to have a bunch of geometry that's going to fill up the space below here. I'm also going to kind of shift this stuff to the left, just for keeping things in line with each other. And then we can actually copy and paste everything that we've created here, minus the camera and render. And that will provide us with the setup that we need for our second diamond shape. So here we're going to leave the box SOP alone. We're going to leave the texture alone, but we are going to modify some things within the geometry. So let's come into the geometry now and make a couple of changes. Here we're just going to change our translate values, because we want this new geometry to be in the upper right quadrant of our render. So what we're going to do is set the translate X to a value of 340, and then our translate Y to 170 instead of negative 170. We're going to leave the rotate in the Y direction at 12, and then we're going to set our rotation in the Z direction to 90. That should have effectively flipped it and kind of mirrored it in the upper right corner. So we're all set there as far as positioning goes, but we need to now change the colors as well. So what we're going to do is just zoom into our table on our second ramp now and modify the colors there. And I think what I'll do, just to make it easier to follow along, is delete all of the colors here first, so that you don't get confused by what's already in the table. And then we can enter from there. So we're going to leave the position values alone, because those are going to stay the same in every table, and the alpha values alone, because those are also going to be the same, but I've just cleared out the RGB color channels so that we can start fresh. For our very first row, we're going to have a red value of 0.11, then 0.14, and then 0.12. For our second row, we're going to have a value of 0.11 in the red channel once again, 0.19 in the green channel, 0.17 in the blue channel. Then we'll have a value of 0.13 in our third row, 0.26 in the green channel, and then 0.24 in the blue channel. In our fourth row, we're going to have a red value of 0.16, 0.31 in the green column, and then 0.29 in the blue column. In our fifth row, we're going to have a value of 0.22 in the red channel, or red column, 0.39 for the green column, and 0.35 for the blue column. Then we'll have 0.26 for our sixth row there in the red column, 0.42 for the green column, and then 0.38 for the blue column. Once we've got that, our final row here will have a value of 0.13 in the red column, 0.26 in the green column, and 0.24 in the blue column. That should have created this kind of nice sort of dark blue-green gradation. And again, if we then take a look in our rendered output, we should see that we now have a matching and corresponding diamond shape in the upper right of our render. Cool, so now we can actually continue on to our circle shapes, and then we'll finish up once those are complete by adding the square with the red color in the center. So in this case, we're going to actually create new SOPs and new geocomps because these are going to have different operators than what we've already worked with here. And then we'll copy and paste the texturing component because we don't want to have to redo that again. So we're going to start with a tube SOP. And we're going to make a couple of changes here as expected. First of all, let's set the orientation to the z-axis. Then I'm going to set the radius values here to 170 and 170. And then I'm going to set the height to 1680. Then we'll come to the detail page. I'm going to turn on end caps. And then I'm going to set the number of columns here to 80. Then we're going to attach a texture SOP once again, and like before, we're just going to change the projection axis here to x-axis. And we didn't look at this, but what that does is orient the texture in the correct direction on the geometry. So if this was set at the default for this green, blue-green one, if we set that to z-axis, you can see that we don't get the correct application of that texture. X-axis is going to orient that texture correctly. So that is what is happening there. Let's then add a geocomp and put that to the right. We can then, well, we do have a render applied here, but what we'll do is add the material first and then worry about positioning that correctly. So I'm just going to copy and paste the ramp, the null, the ramp keys, and the constant material from before, and then move that down. I'll then drag the constant 3 onto the third geocomp, hit parameter material, and then what we should see is that our circle in the center of the screen is now changed to that same kind of dark blue-green color. Let's go ahead and adjust the colors for our ramp, and then we'll move the position of that geo. So in this case, we're going to be adding some more blue colors. These ones are a little bit still kind of blue-green-ish, but more in the blue direction, I guess. So let's go ahead and make those changes now. We're going to do the same thing where we clear out the RGB channels or the RGB columns, just so it's easier for you to see which ones we have entered and which ones we haven't entered. And then once we've done that, we'll start entering the colors in. Okay, so for the red column, we're going to begin with 0.1, 0.14 for the green, and 0.23 for blue. We're then going to do 0.1 again for the red, 0.21 for the green, and 0.34 for the blue, followed by 0.13 for the red, 0.29 for the green, 0.4 for the blue. On our fourth row, we're going to have a value of 0.18 for the red, 0.35 for the green, and 0.44 for the blue. In the fifth column, or the fifth row rather, we're going to have a value of 0.26 for the red, 0.44 for the green, and 0.50 for the blue. In our second to last row, we're going to have 0.33 for the red, 0.5 for the green, and 0.55 for the blue. And then finally, for our final row, we're going to have 0.13 for the red, 0.30 for the green, and 0.42 for the blue. Go ahead and pause the video here to copy that down if you haven't already. You should be seeing something that looks very similar to this in your ramp. And if we then move the position of our geometry, we should be able to see the same sort of stepped gradation in our output like we do with the other shapes. So in this case, we're going to set our translate X to 170. And then our translate Y will set to -340. Then we need to do a little bit of rotation again. So within the rotate Y parameter, we're going to set that to 12. Then let's take a look in our render. We should then be seeing that circle shape in the bottom right of the screen, which looks good. And then we can actually go ahead and copy and paste this for our second circle, which will be in the upper left. So let's go ahead and copy and paste that now. Here we're going to start by modifying the geometry, and then we'll work on the colors. So in this case, we're going to flip our translate X to -170, our translate Y to 340, and then we're going to flip in the Z direction our rotation value to -180. If we look in the output, we should now see two identical circle shapes in the upper left and the lower right. Then we are going to work on modifying the color once again, and these colors are a little bit more in the periwinkle area, at least in the brighter part of the gradient. So again, I'm going to clear out those colors and then work on re-entering all the new colors that we need. Cool, so here we're going to start with a red value of 0.13, green value of 0.11, blue value of 0.28, then a red value of 0.17, a green value of 0.17, a blue value of 0.44, then a red value of 0.24, green value of 0.28, blue value of 0.54. In our fourth row, we're going to have a value of 0.33 for the red, 0.36 for the green, and 0.59 for the blue. Then in the fifth row, we're going to have 0.43 for the red, 0.48 for the green, and 0.67 for the blue. Then for our sixth row, we're going to have 0.53 for the red, 0.56 for the blue, or the green rather, 0.69 for the blue. And then for our final row, we're going to have 0.33 for the red, 0.37 for the green, and 0.63 for the blue. Again, go ahead and pause the video here and make sure that you've got all those copied down correctly. You should be seeing something very similar to this gradient that we have here. And now if we look at the final output, which we're going to move down now that we've got so many different geometry objects added, we should see that we have those outer components of our composition. So all that is left for us to do here is to add the red square at the center. And we're going to keep this very simple. Instead of making some sort of shape that is tilted somewhat and then flattened by our orthographic camera, we're literally just going to add a rectangle SOP and render that with a ramp texture like we've been doing for everything else, and you just keep it super simple and straightforward. So for that piece of geometry, we're going to add the rectangle SOP like I just mentioned. Make a couple of changes there. We're going to set the size to 340 by 340. Then we're going to add, actually we don't even need to add a texture SOP. In this case, we're going to go straight to the geometry, place that to the right, and then we'll work on our texture. So once again, let's go ahead and copy and paste a previous texture, set up and move that down, maybe move it down even some more so that we have a little space between those things. I'm going to drag the constant material onto the geo, hit parameter material, and then within the ramp keys, we're going to make some adjustments. In this case, the gradation in the original image only has 6 different colors in it instead of this kind of final little sliver. So we're going to actually delete the final row here and make it only have 6 different colors. Then I'm going to clear out the colors once again, and then we can work on filling this table back in. And this is where we're going to be applying those red colors. So in the red channel, 0.33, green channel, 0.15, and blue, 0.15. Red in our second row, 0.47, green, 0.15, blue, 0.18. In our third row, 0.69 in the red, green, 0.10, blue, 0.17. In our fourth row, red, 0.84, green, 0.14, blue, 0.19. Fifth row, 0.87 in the red, green, 0.18, blue, 0.2. And finally, in our final row here, 0.89 in the red, 0.28 green, and blue, 0.25. If we then hit enter and take a look at our final render, we should now be seeing the exact same composition that we saw at the beginning, which again is based on that Vasarely painting that we looked at. Now, one final thing we might want to do here is add a constant top so that we can composite in a black background behind our image. I'm going to set the color here to black. And then I'm going to come to the output page, turn on comp with input, and set the operation to under. And then I'll add a final null, and we can take a look at that output. So that is it for our tutorial today. Hopefully that has given you an idea of how you can start to look at approaching recreating either different works of art or just thinking about how you can use the orthographic projection mode for your camera to create these kind of dimensional abstract works of art of your own. Now that you have built this yourself, you might think about taking this a little bit further by either adjusting the composition to suit your own tastes, maybe changing the colors that you're working with, or you could take advantage of the fact that we are building this generatively within TouchDesigner and, add motion or add some kind of post-effects processing to the output. There are, limitless things that you can do to modify this. But hopefully that has, given you an idea of how you can take inspiration from these artists of the past and work on using them as an example to both challenge your own skill set of being able to recreate things within the software and also think about how you can create interesting compositions of your own. With that, we are going to close out the video. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed putting this together and looking forward to seeing you in the next video here on the Interactive and Immersive HQ.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you're serious about taking your TouchDesigner and interactive skills to the next level, I highly recommend you check out the Interactive and Immersive HQ Pro. It's the only educational resource and community of its kind for TouchDesigner and interactive professionals. You can learn more by checking out the link in the description. And if you like this video, don't forget to hit that like button. And if you're new here, don't forget to hit subscribe and the little bell icon for more awesome free content.